Centuries ago, the Guild Pact was forged. Now we go by each guild to explain what makes them tick. Even more centuries ago, a primordial demon was manifested. Its purpose was deliberate and eclectic destruction. His name is Rakdos. But why did he join the Guild Pact that was all about keeping a balanced order? Which is all that he isn't. Well, we covered Boros last, and Candela suggested for the Rakdos to be next, so the spotlight falls upon the guild that doesn't follow a script. It is fitting for one man to suggest the Rakdos because they are all about individuality. The color black because they're all about planning to gather power for themselves, and red because they always do what they want. Black is about destruction without remorse, while red is destructive without thought. The two allied colors keep alternating between thoughtlessness and ruthlessness. But not all is that simple. Some Rakdos care for a few people they love, and many Rakdos actually plan in advance for their greatest shows to play out well. For the Boros we held a structure for the video, but for the Rakdos we will let that all go. For the Rakdos we will focus on the individuals, and we will start with the most fun performers. I welcome you to the Rakdos Carnarium. Welcome, honored guests. Hold on to your seats as we gaze upon the Rakdos Guild. Give me a hand for our first performer and probably your last. Rakdos, the showstopper. The flaming demon and defiler of all is one of the only Peruns still alive and the only one still in control of his guild. In fact, without Rakdos himself, the Rakdos cult wouldn't exist. Not only because the name would not make any sense, but also because of its inception. The Rakdos Guild was created in order to keep Rakdos himself busy and entertained. Entertained because Rakdos loves the carnage, busy because the guild gives him a purpose. For one, Rakdos has been a great protector of Ravnica. While others would say he helped Gideon get to Nicobolas, the Rakdos know that the demon Rakdos single-handedly killed Nicobolas without any help whatsoever. But after the war came Rakdos' real purpose. The demon guild leader promised to lighten the people's hearts. He would continue to cater to the twisted desire of his cultists, and the cultists would continue to try and garner Rakdos' laughter and favor. Rakdos loves to return favors. Whenever you don't entertain Rakdos and he notices you, you will be reaped. Whenever you have too many fans because of your performance, the ultimate honor awaits you. Whoever gets more fans than the Lord of Riots himself gets to be reaped. And half of your fans will follow you to the grave with the same fell swoop. This is exactly what this card Showstopper does. A Showstopper is a Rakdos ward for your last performance, usually ending in your life stopping. Of course, Rakdos doesn't kill demons, those are his fans. In Karlov Manor, Rakdos gets a new card. Of course, as the patron of chaos, Rakdos loves all the murders going around. The card itself says that you can sacrifice 2 cards in order to satisfy the demon. Otherwise he will go and stop your rampage altogether for not being entertaining enough. Through stopping your rampage, Rakdos gains 2 cards. Another role is the Lord of Riots. In this art, the guild leader foreshadows a future mechanic, which is Spectacle. For one, the flying trampler can only be cast when an opponent has lost life. For the other part, creatures are cheaper for every point of life lost. Spectacle. The Rakdos mechanic that changes the casting cost and effect of a card whenever a show is given. Also activates whenever a bit of life is lost. To the Rakdos and to Rakdos, riots and revels are 2 pieces of the same cloth. Other than riling up riots, Rakdos is also just the strongest being on Ravnica. Even his shadow is a flying 5-powered avatar of everything that's wrong. But Rakdos is not always present for the guild. He often relaxes in his lava pool in Rixmadi. But once he was actually hurt after a long battle with a big slime. While away, the Rakdos guild goes into a more relaxing state. The torture stages turn into more tame clubs, and many Rakdos jesters become bouncers for nightclubs or mercenaries for the richer guildless Ravnicans. But when Rakdos returns, the cultists immediately return to their chaotic selves. Rakdos might be away for a bit longer soon. With the Thunder Junction set coming up, Rakdos seems to be in the set art as a weird, smaller demon with the exact shape of Rakdos. Why he is away is unknown for now. But let's stay on Ravnica and look at Rakdos' second mechanic, Hellbent, which is a really flavorful mechanic for being almost 20 years old. Being Hellbent means you have no cards in hand in order to activate an alternate effect from a card. Flavorfully, it means losing your mind or being at the end of your wits. Another example of this is the Slithering Shade, that activates when all light has faded. But why do the Rakdos want you to lose your mind? Well, when you lose your mind, you are, according to the Rakdos, at your most wise, because at that moment you take absolutely no time to think. Don't think about that wisdom either. Memories and sanity only serve to look at the past or at the future, and as a Rakdos cultist, you are all about this moment. You're actually just very zen. But are the Rakdos philosophers? Let's get to the meat of Rakdos philosophy first. Pain is fun. Personal enjoyment is the most important for the Rakdos. Their first goal is pleasing Rakdos himself, but then the cultists want to follow their own whims, and they want to teach others to do the same. Often, someone sees a Rakdos performance and is turned to the cult because they want to chase the rush the Rakdos gave them. The Rakdos have a natural attraction to anyone. Maybe you think it's weird to be attracted to the adrenaline, beauty and gore of the Rakdos, but just think about the time you stop to look at an accident. The Rakdos employ this type of attraction and have become the gutter of Ravnican society. Every bad thought goes there and eventually all ends in obliteration. Love ends in hatred, life ends in death, inevitably, and light will always dim for darkness to take its place. Whenever you are attracted to a Rakdos show, it will be harder and harder to leave. You might be shocked by the performance at first, but once you're taken in by the spectacle and you get closer and closer to danger, you might never get away. The cult believes that even though their lives are short, Rakdos will be there until eternity as the only darkness that's left. And to get there, the Rakdos put on shows to accelerate life towards its end. The Rakdos don't mind losing life as long as it means they get to hurt others too, or even if it's just to hurt themselves. In Anthem of Rakdos, you see that the Rakdos love to ping their life total in order to grant their creatures power to attack. And the Hellbent effect even doubles that damage. Judith explains the point of accelerating life by contrasting the Rakdos against the Golgari. The Golgari accept death as a part of life. Death feeds life. The Rakdos don't even look at what happens after death per se, they prefer to see death as a hilarious crescendo to a very well lived act. And if the Rakdos look at death, it's in order to mock it, by resurrecting the dead and making it do one final act. As long as its second life is even more fun. An encore is not a bad thing. For many Rakdos, losing their mind is the start of their short time with the cult. The victims of the demon of insanity become mindless lunatics, but that just helps them join the cult, because without a mind, you will be the light of a party one way or the other. Blood Crypt says it best: life is a show and performance is death. By the way, with this in mind, look at the art. If you don't look at this art for long, you might miss it. The flames and the chains dominate the art piece. They make you feel stung for their pointiness. Everything in the art screams that it hurts. But look at the left, the huge staircases down into these pits. Pick a spot in this blood crypt, but choose it wisely. That is, without thought at all, of course. As long as you're willing to descend those massive stairs, anyone is welcome at a Rakdos party, as long as they partake. Even an Azorius Law Mage would be welcomed with classical Rakdos warmth. Even if you just came out of the grave and you're a massive demon-like dragon, you probably are allowed into most of the rings of Rakdos. Rings? Exactly, like hell. The Rakdos have rings of territory that form around the home of demon Rakdos. These smaller parts are formed around the clubs of important members of the guild. Most rings, of course, last for about a month. Every ring has a ring leader that will inevitably die in an act. These are different kinds of rings. First of all, there are multiple newer clubs that form around diversion clubs. These are just restaurants with exotic food and drinks. They might be a circus or a bathhouse. They can be more classy strip clubs that are like burlesque. You should note that diversion rings are grotesque as well, but these are entertainment plazas that you could see in real life. And usually these rings aren't too overt in breaking the law. Usually there are a few rings that are made around debauchery clubs, which feature tattoo artists, scar artists and arena fighting. These are your darkest nightclubs where there are no rules aside from that one. Only one ring is dedicated to torture, and that's the ring around Rick's Maddie. Most of the Rakdos cards that you see are from here. Designers of the game have stated that that's because there are fighters in this ring, and Magic the Gathering is a fighting game. The torturers in this ring are the Blood Witches, a role that you can only fill after being resurrected, because the Golgari aren't the only ones with that trick. The Blood Witches have died once, so they know very well that they want to live. Rakdos appreciates this philosophy and allows the witches to advise him. It seems like the demon leader mostly appreciates you for the amount of times you have lived. Imagine having to give advice in a hole with the heat of lava. That's Rick's Maddie. It's a festival grounds underground covered with lava and blood that all boils the same. It's guarded by artists ranging from unicyclists to jugglers to fire breathers to two ogres with ogre skull masks on. Rick's Maddie itself at the core of the ring is a pit of lava, which Rakdos uses as a pool. On the walls of Rick's Maddie there are doors from which you can hear the screams and laughter day and night. Although you wouldn't know the time here, because there is just so much to be seen in the demon's literal crypt. Aside from a bath, hold on with me here, Rick's Maddie is also the sewage drain of Ravnica. Not literally, but in the way that all fears and other negative emotions come together there to mix with the skeletons of previous artists and the blood and lava that drips from the walls. Together they form new horrors so that all fears on Ravnica keep recycling themselves. A plus side of this is that you probably know where your fears are coming from, because the Rakdos cult is so loud. Loud, what a fun word. The Rakdos help release anger. In the story Illusions, we're told that a demonic poet who has manifested at least 2300 years ago uses the Rakdos performances to release his anger. This demon is called Kodo and is in love with an effigy mage called Sita. So much so that he curses an Azorius mage for it. So yeah, he still hurts people, but out of love this time. The Azorius had forbidden simple effigy magic. In fact, it was the Azorius' fault that Kodo had to give him the excruciating pain. The two then go to a club that Kodo knows and Kodo kills the show, but it gets stopped by an Azorius soldier. That means that the people in the club could not release their anger. On their way back, the two meet a demonic torture cage troop. An imp uses a Rakdos spell on Kodo to have him join the act, and he uses his nimbleness to style on the troop. Sita says Kodo should do an act like that, but Kodo had tried that before and Rakdos had killed half of his fans because Kodo had gained one fan more than Rakdos had. So he did not want to return to his act ever again. At the end of the night, Sita got contained by another Azorius soldier. The only thing she did was correct a spelling mistake on a piece of graffiti. Kodo and his friend enter the prison by having the friend be dressed up like a baby. When they enter, they get a coloring book from an Azorius guard that features Rakdos getting stomped on by Dovin Baan, their leader. See who the aggressors are here? The two free Sita, but the two get caught and used as slaves. But the two had brought a piece of blood fray magic that's used by ringmasters to incite riots in the streets. The Azorius jailbreaks out into the riot and everyone escapes, and Kodo, the demon, marries Sita. The Rakdos do feel love, and Rakdos and his cult accept everyone and even treat every human that has lived once the same. As long as they bleed, they are worth gold in the eyes of the cult. The Rakdos value acceptance of the self, and they value the acceptance of others in the same manner. If you are going to hurt everyone, at least you're very fair about it. The only thing they don't accept is unacceptance. Doesn't matter what the subject you're objecting to is. The last piece of philosophy before it gets boring is to put the strong down a leg. The Rakdos creators feel glee whenever they get to be rebellious. Defiance against the strong is a valued stance for every Rakdos artist. An art theme for the Rakdos is the theme of jokers. You can see that here with the checkered costume, for example. The Joker is the perfect fool that everyone underestimates while they hold the deepest waters for the established to sink in. The Rakdos often feel like they're the true philosophers and that others underestimate their philosophy. If, for example, a living guildpact gets too much power, the Rakdos might make a show featuring them like we see in the art of the literal jester and guildmage of the Rakdos, whose abilities to force your opponent to take a damage or to discard a card are meant to take the strong, like Jace, down. Let's look a bit more at the two other mechanics of the Rakdos called Unleash and Spectacle. Unleash lets you choose how a creature enters the battlefield. Will you constrain the artist with chains and cages and let it enter as this example a 2/1, it will be able to block boringly. Or will you let the artist out, perhaps put a cage on his head like a helmet to help him fall down his chain? He will enter as a 3/2 that can only attack and never block. Better. And then there's Spectacle again. We saw it a little bit before, but this is my favorite Rakdos mechanic. Spectacle lets you do something as long as you have drawn blood. I mean, look at this Razor Witch, who you can play for 2 mana cheaper once you've chipped your opponent. The Rakdos are eager to enter and make beautiful, entertaining things happen once they've smelled a bit of carnage, respectfully. The most important role of the Rakdos is to entertain, and for this most important role I want to point you to the story Life in the Ring, where a troupe called the Area of Hilrod just had a great performance, where Rinny even lost blood, for which he took the blood, showed it to the crowd and said, "This is for you." Genoria is another member and she used to be Orzhov. They met a young girl who wanted to join the area. When she got rejected, she kicked Rinny, spat in his face and parkoured off. Suffice to say that Rinny liked her for her fervor. After the act, Rinny used the Celestian salve against the pain, and the next day, Rinny went to look for the girl. Dunicia was her name. She explained how she did not understand how the Rakdos could perform acts of beauty in the one moment and brutality in the next. Rinny's answer is perfect. They play the role they were meant to play, to make people laugh, to remind them how precious and how fleeting our lives are. No matter how harsh or short, our lives are a gift. They play the role they were meant to play. He explains that another role is to please Rakdos, so that he can go back into his slumber. To make sure that he doesn't destroy Ravnica, Rinny invites Dunicia to his show, and he feels his scars and his pain that return from the Celestian bombs that were off. And when Rinny lands for his final act, he and his friends explode. Their injuries too much, and there was something else. The show was enough to make Rakdos laugh, and enough to have Dunicia swear to top that performance. And all along, Rinny just knew that. Onto Riot Mages, who lead Rakdos festivals. They know how to incite an energy into groups of people that would usually lead them to a riot, but instead the citizens are led to use that energy in order to join the cruel festivities. In fact, when Ral Zarek was having a resonator built in Rakdos territory, they would keep getting lost in the clubs and Ral had to keep dragging the workers out of those clubs. Rakdos was at Ral's side at the time, but that didn't keep the Riot Mages from attracting new guests to their shows. As our finale, let's introduce the cult legends, opening up with Judith, the Scourge Diva, who's being carried in by 2 muscled retainers, wields a short sword and a large whip that holds it. She gives your creatures power. She riles them up in many ways, and when your cultists die for their diva, Judith deals a damage to another target. An ability normally unique to demons, but everyone is a demon under Judith's eye. Her shows are famously deadly, and when one is done, she's the last one standing. Judith is seen in the Murders of Karlov set, leaving cues for Rakdos to be the instigator of the murders, so that she can take over the guild. In her latest card, Judith is featured to give instants and sorceries Death Touch and Lifelink, meaning she loves to revel in the carnage they leave behind, and the carnage will kill you according to Judith's promise. Or whenever you leave Garnets, you get to create a 2/2 red imp, further showing us that Judith loves to use devils in her troop. This imp is double the demonic power, because it deals 2 damage when it dies, instead of 1. Judith has upped her game in Carlos Manor's murder set. She is referenced in Light Up the Stage, a hedonistic card that lets you draw 2 after a spectacle, but you can play the exiled cards only for a turn. And Judith is shown in her signature card, Theater of Horrors, where in the background 2 acrobats are falling to their doom and another is being flayed alive. The card lets you use Light Up the Stage's theme for exiling cards, showing that the mechanic here means that we're setting a stage with these cards and then you enable a spectacle. You may start playing the cards. A show from Judith never starts before blood is drawn. And for 4 mana, Judith enters the stage herself and she deals the damage to start the show. Jury is another famous theater master. His review features jester-like performances of strong leaders and institutions. His rule is that at least 1 audience member has to die. Very laid back when you compare him with Judith. Jury's ability is to grow whenever you sacrifice permanents. This is because his crowd grows from every show and the bigger the crowd, the more riled up Jury gets. Jury is fated to die in one of his own shows, sometime in the future, but when he dies he will go down in a blast, taking all of his audience with him. Next up is Lysolda or Isolda, the Blood Witch. She was, as many other Blood Witches, an advisor to Rakdos, but she raised him from the slumber in Rixmadi by sacrificing the blood of Jared of the Golgari. Rakdos proceeded to fight a giant simic blob and got hurt. Isolda got hurt from the backlash of the spell and got feasted upon by her other guild members. Rakdos' essence then spread over multiple cultists and Rakdos went to sleep for a while. Lysolda sacrifices not only to deal damage and inflict pain, but also to gain power for herself. A very Rakdos trait, sometimes. 2 more to go and the last one is a heck of a kicker. This one is just Massacre Girl though, a leader of Spikers, which are groups of Rakdos cultists who form the muscle of the cult. These gangs have their own rituals and their infighting is usually very entertaining to other cultists who can't help but join in. This is especially true for Massacre Girl's gang, for they are the most random in their massacres. No one is safe from them, as you can see from their own mechanic that kills everyone. Once her killing has started, it will soon turn into a massacre. When Massacre Girl had invaded her friend Etrada's home because the traps there had been decaying, she also showed off her Razor Witch skills by conjuring up knives. She was paid to kill Proft, but as he was with Massey's friend, she wasn't paid enough to do the killing, and thus she didn't do the killing. Massacre Girl is so popular in the cult that she's gained groupies who try to fake being her. Of course, this might help Girl in a way that she doesn't get recognized, but she's been looking for a new way to show that the massacre was hers. This Massacre Girl card from Karlov Manor was featured with Wither, meaning that she and her gang will deal damage in the form of -1 counters. This card, for one, shows that she is thinking about her gang having to be massacre people too. For 2, the card shows that she has her new way of showing that she killed people. And whenever a massacre happens because her Spikers have massacred the creature, you draw a card for every little kill. Her flavor says, "Did I do it? You'll have to be more specific." This is a perfect flavor, as it is always very obvious that it was her. I promise you a Hekara of a kicker. First in command under Rakdos, she always performed comedy and tragedy with a smile. Yes, the Rakdos also perform tragedies, while she does do so with the power to conjure up daggers out of nothing, an infinite amount of them no less. She's also killed a man with the stem of a pepper by filling it up his... Her troop friends are musicians whose music can make anyone deaf because it's so loud. Their music and dancing seemed chaotic, yet they all kept the non-existent beat. The troop had come to help Hekara against Azorius guards, and when a guard told them to go home, a juggler let a metal ball the size of a fist fall on the guard, and he died. The Azorius-owned street then dissolved into chaos. A hallmark of Rakdos' strategy, as you can see from the fact that they kept the beat without a beat. Hekara uses Rakdos street languages, which are a very big conglomeration of languages from many cultures and change every week or so. She calls Lord Rakdos his incinerationist, and after meeting Ral-Zarek, she called him a boon companion, for example. In fact, she instantly became friends with him and saved him before being saved by Ral a second later. And while Ral doubted whether he could be friends, Hekara kept repeating that they were mates. And when Ral was down after failing his mission, Hekara was there to cheer him on, because that's what the Rakdos do. On the other hand, she did suggest things like killing the whole Celestian conclave and was all too happy when she got to kill some deaf priests. So you shouldn't see her as too dependable. But she was still a great friend. And when Vraska had betrayed them, she'd asked to forgive Vraska for it because they were mates. So Hekara went to Vraska without permission from Rakdos, because Rakdos prefers to be the betrayer, not the betrayed. Typical Rakdos fashion actually, doing something without permission. She was killed by Vraska and Lavinia. The latter specifically pierced her with a sword. This was while she had a crush on Queen Vraska, because Hekara said that she wanted to grab the snakes on Vraska's head and that she wanted to be lovers with her. Hekara's last words were, "Never been stabbed all the way through before. Always wondered what it was like. It's not bad, doesn't hurt as much as I thought." And when the blade was removed, she finished, "Ah, that's more like it," and died. I repeat, her last words were, "Oh, that's more like it." Then she was brought back to Rixmadi just when Kaya met Rakdos there. When she was returned, the second in command caressed Hekara lovingly and just said that she should have returned sooner. The corpse was then taken to the Jester's crypt, from which she returned from it as a blood witch to help Kaya and their group. When Vraska apologized, Hekara said, "Dying sucked, but hey, it worked out." And that's the perfect last quote for this video. A round of applause, please.